Chapter 30. "How are you feeling, Doctor?" Church looked up from his reading, saw Admiral Thaves' bulk filling the doorway. He sighed inwardly, but smiled at Thaves, lay his remote on the nightstand. "Better, Admiral. Actually, I'm quite well enough to get back to work." Thaves shook his head. "Forget it. The meds say another week." The Admiral looked around the bare sickbay room as if he'd never seen it before, hadn't visited every couple of days for the last 3 weeks. The room was small but comfortable, the walls a pale green, muted, a place of rest. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost gentle. "Everything okay?" Church folded his hands, stared down at them absently. It was a question that had plagued him for many days now. I keep thinking of McGinnis." "That much is true." Dave scowled, transforming his face from merely ugly to ugly and mean, a fleeting glimpse of a much younger Thaves, a man of no small means, a man to reckon with, a stern flash of how he had made his stars, of war days long past. Only an instant, then gone. "Hell! You saw the recordings. She was a cold-blooded murderer. Killed Crespi with her bare hands and might have killed you, except for the guards." Dave smiled, his old self again. He was probably attempting a look of reassurance, though it came as an apology, an embarrassment. "The Marines picked her up yesterday. And don't worry about her coming back either." Church sighed, careful not to reveal the rest of it. Thaves could never know, wouldn't know, would stay oblivious to the human emotions that they surely shared in this matter. Church reached up absently to finger the small bandage across his nose. "It's not that. Some of the things she said. About me. I suppose it has me thinking whether my work here is wrong." Thaves frowned, walked to the bed, and rested his weight against the frame. His face turned serious, his gaze firm and unwavering. "She was insane, Paul. Your work, your research has saved countless lives. You need to remember that. Why, if it weren't for your viral tent, my own daughter wouldn't be alive today." Church nodded humbly. Thaves had great affection for his youngest, an affection that had allowed Church to write his own rules on board the station. Dave signed releases, ordered transports to bring new people to the station, and turned a blind eye to the fact that many of those people he had never met, and never would. Church wondered absently how Thaves would react if he knew what was really going on, and he commended himself once again for having the presence of mind to lock up his private lab before that last miserable experiment. The Admiral was still speaking. "So don't worry over anything that crazy bitch accused you of. No one believed a word. You're a good man, Paul." Church actually considered the statement for a moment, the implications of his own humanity. In any sense, good was not what came to mind. "Think where it got Crespi," Church said quietly. The Admiral dropped his serious pep talk look for the much rarer full sympathy one, feeling blindly for some connection to an emotional realm. Church was not the only being that had to search, to fake. He never had been. "I'm sorry about Crespi. You two really hit it off, I guess." Church looked down, counted to 3 slowly. On the last count, Dave slapped the edge of the mattress and stood, signalling the end of his visit. "Well, I guess you could use some rest. I'll stop by tomorrow and see how you're doing." Church smiled up at him gratefully. "That would be nice, Admiral. And thanks for coming. It means a lot to me." "Nothing of it," he blustered, and Church could see the pleasure in his rough face before he turned and walked out. It was appealing to affect someone that way, to bring a measure of contentment to his fellow man. Even an overblown and pathetic individual like Thaves. Indeed, the lowest of creatures deserved some happiness, he had come to believe. Thaves was a throwaway character in his own drama, but he could still feel. Strange how things changed. Church stared blankly at the wall for a moment, thinking about McGinnis. She was gone, finally. He was almost embarrassed by the cool relief that had flooded through him at the Admiral's confirmation. Almost, but not quite. He tried not to make lying to himself a practice, and the core truth was that she had scared him, and scared him badly. She'd been like a drone when she'd come after him, mindless except for the sole motive of slaughter, her movements as physically able and as driven with purpose. A drone of his own making, but in a way he'd never expected. Church shuddered involuntarily and reached for the remote. He needed to clear his head of her, fill his thoughts with something besides the remembrance of his fear. He clicked a button, activated the wheelchair at the foot of his bed. He had managed to get some work done, unofficially of course. He'd head back to the lab, check on the progress of a few things, crowd the woman out with comforting routine. He slid into the chair, steeling himself for pain, but there was hardly any now. The worst had been his face, the cheekbone, but the leg fracture from the fall had been an agony unto itself. The drone, reaching, the blood in his eyes turning it red and impossibly more manic, the sudden meeting of fates, the terror, and the sharp pain as his leg gave way, the acid burns that quilted his human flesh as the bullets found their mark. It was late, the bay empty, though no one would have stopped him anyway. The meds were fine for stern warnings, but their follow-through was somewhat lacking, particularly for him. He had known for some time that the station was truly under his command, but had only come to appreciate it in the last few weeks. He rode toward the supply storage area, the wheels rolling noiselessly against the smooth floor. He had to strain to reach the door control, but again, no real pain. He'd be out sooner than a week, surely. The entry slid open, revealed the seldom used passage that he'd come to know intimately in the past few days. It was quite something, the Innominata. The entire station was one great labyrinth, silent corridors connecting everything to everything else, every door opening beneath his touch to disclose yet another path. Surprises. There had been too many lately, too many revelations that were frightening in their quiet subtlety. When he told his story to Crespi and McGinnis, he'd been unable to focus on that feeling, the influence it had had on him, and still he didn't know. What he did know was that it would not leave him now. The memories, the vision of his mother's dying face. He could no longer dismiss his past. The chair slid down the dim hall, in and out of the shadows, veering first to the right and then again, then left and down a sloping decline. He felt fine, he supposed. Should feel better than fine now that McGinnis was gone. But ever since the attack, he'd somehow mislaid his sense of humour. Everything seemed tainted now, as if the colours around him had all muted a shade, nothing as bright as it used to be. "You're just bedsore, Doctor. You'll see. Once you're on your feet again, all will be well." He hoped so, wanted it to be true, but felt certain just the same that he would never again be as confident as before. He'd made mistakes, had let things escape his control, and he had inspired a practical stranger to a depth of hatred beyond any he'd ever known. Things were different. The humanity he'd shunted aside for so long had come back, whispering to him, coaxing him. First had been fear, but now others, simple, pleasant feelings that were not the wry amusement he had known. A soul-searching that gave him pause at every turn. The essence of the truth had been clouded by these things, would perhaps be lost if he did not take care. And would that be so tragic? So debilitating? There was no answer to that. Not now. Sighing, he reached for the code slate as the chair stopped, reversed, pulled up beside the plug for the round gleaming hatch in front of him. He inserted it, punched a button, and waited. The door opened and the chair moved forward, slowly now, rested midway across the floor of his small private lab. He looked at the large holding tank that dominated the room, noted the minute changes of the form inside. He smiled a little. Things were progressing quite well, actually. Infinitely better than his last attempt. The once human form had grown a semi-synthetic plate system, dark in colour, ridges of bone mutating, transforming, becoming. Spines extended from the shoulders, and he could see where something like a dorsal fin had appeared, perhaps the aquatic influence. He focused on the face, and his smile faded. As always, he could think of nothing to say, no one thing that would explain how he felt. And as always, he tried anyway. I hope you know, Tony. None of this is personal. The dark, unconscious form of Anthony Crespi made no reply, but then none was expected.